With the signing of this revised travel ban, a move which, regardless of your politics, creates new division between Americans and many in the rest of the world, today feels like an especially good day to take a closer look at cultural divides which affect everything from education and business to art and culture. Joining me now is an expert on these issues, Cambridge-based author and essayist Gish. Her latest book is The Girl at the Baggage Claim, Explain the East-West Culture Gap. Nice to see you, Gish.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So explain the East-West culture gap. Is it as simple as individualism versus collectivism, or is that too simple?
Well, no, that is too simple. Obviously when we talk about, the two selves that dominate in the world, we use words like dominate, we use words like spectrum, right? Because most people are actually kind of in the middle. But nonetheless, there is a spectrum, and we can identify the two endpoints. And in a very general kind of way, you can sort of say, one dominates in the East and one dominates in the West.
Do you make judgment at all about it? You don't?
No. I see these things as cultural adaptations, right? So the question to me is it adaptive? Is it not adaptive? But the fact of the matter is a self that is very adaptive to Asia is not necessarily adaptive to America and vice versa. Our circumstances are so different.
But why do we care? Do we care because we're becoming a more global society, because obviously immigration is a big issue? Why do we care about understanding this divide?
Well, I think we've always cared because if you don't understand how culturally defined you are, you don't really understand what it means to be human, right? So at a very foundational level, this is a very important thing. But also from a practical level now too, we must know because we have millions of educational issues. We have issues in the classroom. And we have issues, on the business front and on the legal front, right? You have all these arguments about human rights, or arguments about intellectual property laws. And just in a general kind of way, I think that many of us would like to feel that, in this globalized age, that we're kind of cosmopolitan. And I think that, if you go to China, you see, buildings that are built to look like French chateau or like a full-size replica of the Titanic. I think that you're laughing, you say, well, I think we'd like to know what is going on. What are they thinking that they're doing these things straight? It's not, and also somewhat problematically, right? When we think about those knockoffs of the Apple stores, for instance, it can be kind of a problem.
But in a country like this, isn't almost everybody between both of those
course.
worlds?
Of course.
You are clearly, right?
Absolutely, and I see myself as kind of ambidependent, as having both selves, and many people do. And that is absolutely the case. But in a general kind of way, even though we have many people with both selves, and I'm including people like Tom Brady, people, a lot of very prominent people, we still have a dominant narrative.
You can't just throw Tom Brady away. You include people like Tom Brady. Why? Because is he the star, or is he part of a team? Is that what?
Tom Brady, even though, of course, many people say he's the greatest quarterback of all time, right? But he always credits his teammates, right? I mean, all the time, right? And people sort of say, well, that's false modesty. They see he's being phony. People have accused the Patriots of being un-American, right?
You know what it is? He's Asian. That's the only thing I can figure out.
Exactly. You stole my punchline.
But
the answer is a lot of people are what I call interdependent or flex-dependent in America, but that's not our dominant narrative, and so we try to sort of suppress that self. We act like it's not there, or we call it names, and I think the name calling is very, very problematic.
Did you see Anderson Cooper's interview with 60 Minutes last night with Marine Le Pen?
I did not.
Well, people know she's the nationalist,
and
she doesn't want Jews wearing yarmulkes. She doesn't want Muslims wearing scarves. Nothing.
Right.
And she talks about how I think roughly 10% of the population is foreign-born, maybe a little bit more, and she talks about assimilation and says, well, why would they come to France if they didn't want it to be France? The point being, you have to totally assimilate. Does the whole debate about assimilation play out with this whole explanation of this culture gap?
Well, I would say that, there are people who would argue that what it means to be American is to get rid of all your ethnic markers, to somehow, that's sort of the melting pot theory, right? But first of all, we haven't talked that way for many, many years in America. And I would say
we're talking about it right now in
Well,
America.
We are, but I would say that, we have to expand our idea. For anyone who still has that model of what it means to be American, I would say it is time to think again. And I would say many people have already been thinking again. And we're thinking again partly because it's who we are. Do you know what I mean? In other words, we have been a nation of immigrants from the beginning. So that's part of the reason. But also, it's our great strength. in my book, and this is a very well-established thing that the different cells. I'm talking about these two ends of the spectrum. The difference goes right down to the perceptual level. So if you imagine that one has kind of like a macro lens, very, very good with small things, or a microscope. One has a wide-angle lens. Now the answer is, if you were trying to get at the truth of any, get to the bottom of any given problem, of course you would want to have both lenses. Like, why would you have an ideology that privileged one and somehow sidelined the other? Why would you do that? It's a disservice to us as Americans who are trying to thrive and compete in a global economy.
Can we? The other day when you were kind enough to be on the radio, I read you a quote that was very controversial in a story we wrote in the Globe. Did we fail the Tsarnaev somehow? This is after the marathon.
Right.
It's not clear that we did, and yet for people who knew Jahar especially, who had seen him at school, who had studied and partied and played sports with him, the lurking fear has been that we failed to truly open our hearts and we accepted him, but only up to a point. Is that part of... That is. Flesh it out for me if you can.
Well, let me just sort of say in a general, I took an incredible amount of heat from that. I mean, as you know, I came to a Best American Short Stories reading, and there were police cruisers outside because people are coming to attack me and so on. But I stand by that question. But in a very general kind of way, when we talk about these two different selves and we talk about their perceptual tendencies, one self, the self that's very individualistic, very, very, very interested in this kind of pit that we have inside, believe that's sacred, that also tends to be in any given situation will say, well, who's at fault? They would say, well, the pit's at fault. The other self, which the flexi self or the interdependent self, more oriented toward the larger picture. Yes, well, what happened? They'll say, well, the problem is in the environment, and the answer is, this is just like I was just asserting, the macro lens and the wide angle lens, and the answer is, I'm just saying with Jahar Tsarnaev, I'm trying to say, was there a problem? Do you know what I mean? Is the problem only in him? Or was there another problem? When we look at the environment, was there something that might have contributed to this terrible, terrible thing he did?
Brave woman.
That's not to excuse it.
I understand that. Gish, it's great to see you. The book
My
again
pleasure.
is The Girl with the Baggage Claim, explaining the East-West culture gap.